Yo, what's going on, guys? This is Kev. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into 3 critical phrasing techniques that truly leveled up my guitar soloing. These techniques are simple, they're not rocket science, and they're concepts that you can begin implementing into your playing today, regardless of where you're at in your guitar and improvisation journeys. We'll be breaking down these concepts by looking at and deconstructing guitar solos from 3 different performances I played with Matisyahu back in 2023. The Matisyahu gig relied heavily on improvisation. Matis is a huge fan of and is greatly inspired by jam bands like Fish and the Grateful Dead. And so he expects his band to be able to improvise and collectively mold and reshape his classic songs into something new live on stage every night. With that in mind, while I'm proud of these solo excerpts and happy with the way that they came together live on stage, I want you to keep in mind none of them are perfect, and there's certainly not some gold standard for how to play. As guitarists and improvisers, the goal is to always be getting better, there's always more to learn, and there's always ways to grow. But these solos do showcase these essential techniques and are great examples of how phrasing can impact the musicality and emotive nature of a solo. So on that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the first technique and the first solo. Before we go any further, quick little bit of housekeeping. If you are a guitarist or a musician, make sure to subscribe to the channel below. It really helps support us, keeps me doing what I'm doing, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys. All right, phrasing technique number 1. Create melodic lines that flow nicely from one to the next. This may sound cliche, but it's true. Music is like language, and as such, it's received and processed by its listeners in a similar way. Therefore, when writing or improvising melodic ideas, they should flow nicely from one to the next in a digestible and logical way, a lot like a conversation. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the solo section from Matisyahu's 2005 hit, King Without a Crown. And while you're watching, listen to the way that the phrases flow from one to the next, and really pay attention to where I put my pauses and how I start and end each phrase. One of the main techniques that I use throughout this solo to make sure the phrases flowed nicely from one to the next is I would end a phrase and begin the next phrase in the same register on the instrument. And more often than not, I would even end a phrase and begin the next phrase on the same note, or a note very close to the note that ended the previous phrase. Large jumps from one register to another, especially before a musical thought is completed, can often sound disjointed and jarring sometimes. So this method and being conscious of that as you're crafting melodic lines really prevents that from happening. If you end a phrase on a C here and begin the next phrase on the C or D or E, it keeps the conversation sounding consistent. Now, like most things in music, this isn't necessarily a hard and fast rule. Sometimes dramatic jumps from one register to another between phrases can be used strategically for emotional effect. But that being said, flowing progressively from one register to another within a phrase is generally going to feel more musically cohesive. Here's a pro tip that I learned from chicken pickin' country guitar master Johnny Hiland. Try creating phrases that travel from one register to another within the phrase. Try creating a phrase that goes from the lower register to the higher register, and then in the next phrase, go high to low, or vice versa. It's a great way to create really interesting, emotive solos that are cohesive and keep the listener engaged. Alrighty, technique number 2, incorporate dynamics into your phrases. And when I'm talking about dynamics here or dynamism, I'm not just talking about volume. I know in music, when we hear the word dynamics, the first thing that comes to mind is variations in volume. And yes, volume is one aspect of this, but I'm also talking about variations in your touch, variations in your rhythm, variations in note speed. All of these things throughout the course of your solo, throughout the course of your musical story should fluctuate. And that's what's going to keep the listeners interested and engaged. Alrighty, on that note, let's go ahead and listen to our second solo excerpt. It's from a performance of Matisyahu's track Driftin from his 2017 album Undercurrent.
Hey, make some noise for my guy Kevin on the guitar right here.
So as you guys probably heard, during that solo section, the band and I were just vamping over one chord. It was just a consistent E minor. So the harmonic structure and harmonic variation during that solo was very minimal and very consistent. So as a result, I had to incorporate a lot of dynamism and variety into my phrases and into my melodic lines in order to keep the solo interesting and keep listeners engaged and paying attention. So to reiterate, fluctuations across these different facets of your playing, whether it's volume, touch, rhythm, note speed, the list goes on, it gives your melodic lines in your playing a certain level of unpredictability, which keeps your audience interested, captivated, and wondering what's coming up next in your musical story. All right, last but certainly not least, technique number 3. Craft your solo to serve the song. I know that this sounds so simple and straightforward, but I can't tell you how many players I see all the time perform solos that are completely mismatched from the song that they are performing. That all comes down to your phrasing, your dynamic choices, your tonal choices. The solo and what you're crafting has to serve the style, genre, and melodic and motivic ideas of the song that you're playing. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to quote the song's main melody in your solo or anything like that, although you totally can. It just means that your melodic lines and your improvised lines should sound and feel familiar and have a similar cadence and quality to the main melody and style of the song. With that in mind, let's go ahead and listen to the third and final solo. It's a performance of Matisyahu's 2023 single, Ripples. Let's go ahead and check it out.
Hey, make some noise for my man Kevin on the guitar.
the end of that clip there, I left a little snippet of the main motivic idea, just for anyone who might not be familiar with this track Ripples. But you know, as you could tell, that song has a very laid-back halftime reggae groove. So this solo was not the opportunity to bust out every shred chop I'd ever worked out. This was an opportunity for me to craft lyrical melody lines that were catchy, that I would imagine the audience singing along to. That really, I think, served the song well and adhered to the style of what Modest was going for in this track. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you dug this video, please make sure to like, leave me a comment. What did you think was helpful? What would you like me to expand on? Are there any questions I maybe didn't answer? And make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so that you're notified the next time we drop a video. Thank you so much, guys. Happy soloing. We'll see you on the next one.